Dad's voice split the air like a blade. "Get out! Never come back!" The clatter of silverware died all at once. Vivian laughed softly, that perfect little social laugh that never reached her eyes. Chloe clapped her hands together as if she were watching a show. My hand tightened around the handle of my coat. The smell of peppermint pie was still clinging to my fingers. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just turned and walked out. The front door shut behind me with a sound that felt like an ending. Outside, the air was cold and sharp with cold. The porch light threw a yellow circle on the snow, and my footprints looked like bruises on the white ground. I started the car. The radio came alive with an ad for a Christmas sale in Tacoma, cheerful voices that didn't match the heaviness in my chest. I drove without music, the highway lit by red taillights and the low hum of winter tires on the asphalt. Somewhere near the exit to Federal Way, my phone buzzed. It was Lisa, my closest friend. "Just checking in. Family dinner goes okay." I let the screen go dark without answering. The quiet inside the car felt cleaner than any comfort words could bring. When I reached Seattle, the city lights rose ahead like a promise of distance. My apartment smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. I hung my coat on the rack, set the pie on the counter untouched, and poured myself a glass of water. My reflection in the window looked tired but not broken. I whispered, almost as if to reassure myself. That silence didn't mean surrender. It meant I had learned when to stop wasting breath. For days, I didn't tell anyone what happened. At work, I sat through meetings about client portfolios, about projected returns, about Q1 budgets. My voice was steady. My hair is perfect. I smiled when I needed to. No one at the firm had to know that my own dad had just thrown me out of his house. The world rewards composure, not confession. The first sign that something was off came on a Thursday morning, almost 3 weeks after that dinner. I was reviewing a set of spreadsheets when my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. I hesitated, then answered. "Good morning, is this Vanessa Hagen?" the voice said. Male, calm, professional. "My name is Aaron Patel. I'm calling from Evergreen Bank." "Yes, this is Vanessa." He cleared his throat. "I just need to confirm a few details regarding your recent auto loan." I frowned. "I'm sorry, what loan?" "According to our system, there's an active vehicle loan under your name for $120,000 issued earlier this month. The delivery address listed is in Tacoma." The pen slipped from my hand. "That's not me," I said. He paused, perhaps sensing the weight behind those 3 words. "Would you like me to read the details? Please do." He gave me the VIN, the dealer name, Rain City Motors, and an address on South Tacoma Way. The last 4 digits of the Social Security number matched mine. The email listed was almost identical to mine, but with 1 letter changed. I felt my heartbeat slow instead of quicken. Years of financial work had trained me for moments like this. I asked him to send copies of the application and signature via secure email. He agreed, his tone now cautious. "By the way, Ms. Hagen, if this wasn't you, I recommend placing a fraud alert immediately." "I already will. Thank you for calling." After hanging up, I sat still for a long minute. The screensaver on my laptop pulsed softly, a shifting blue pattern that made the room feel too quiet. I knew exactly how identity theft worked, how long it took to fix, how it could ruin a person's credit for years. But the part that made my skin prickle was the address, South Tacoma Way. That was where my dad worked part-time doing repairs in a rented garage space. I opened my browser and placed a fraud alert with all 3 credit bureaus, then froze my accounts. My hands were steady as I typed the passwords. After that, I filed a preliminary identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission and saved the confirmation number. Steps. Clear, logical steps. I had learned long ago that control isn't something you feel. It's something you do. When Lisa called that evening, I picked up. "You sound strange," she said. "Everything is okay." "Fine," I said, though I knew the word didn't fit. "That man again." "Which man?" "Your dad." A pause. Then she sighed. "He'll regret it one day." "I don't want to regret. I want distance." "You'll get both," she said softly. After we hung up, I opened the email from Aaron Patel. Attached were scanned copies of the loan documents. I scrolled through until I saw it. My name printed neatly above a forged signature that almost looked like mine. Almost. The stroke on the G of Hagen was wrong, looping too high, as if someone had practiced but never quite mastered it. I leaned back in my chair. My apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the streetlight flickered once, twice. I closed my eyes and pictured the last family dinner. The smug smile on Vivian's face, the quick clapping of Chloe's hands. It fit too perfectly, like a puzzle snapping into place. They thought I was gone for good, that I'd just disappear. I printed the documents, slid them into a folder, and wrote the date in the corner. There was no anger, only precision. The next morning, I called Evergreen Bank's fraud department. The woman who answered introduced herself as Dana Parker. Her voice carried that practiced calm of someone who had seen too many messes. She listened carefully as I explained everything, then said she'd open a case immediately. She asked if I suspected anyone. I told her I had a hunch but needed proof. "Then let's get you that proof," she said. After the call, I stood by the window and watched traffic crawl along the wet street. It was barely 9 but already gray. A delivery truck idled outside the cafe across the road. The driver waved to someone inside, normal life going on untouched. I thought about the last time Dad had borrowed money from me, 5 years ago. He'd said it was for a short-term investment. It turned into a silent loss that no one mentioned again. That was the pattern. Pretend nothing happened, act like dignity could be rebuilt on denial. Not this time. That evening, I drove past the Tacoma garage, slow headlights dimmed. The place was closed, but I recognized the silver SUV parked inside through the half-open bay door. Brand new, untouched snow on the hood. My chest tightened. Back home, I sent Dana the photo and the coordinates. She replied within minutes. "Good catch. We'll coordinate with the dealer." Then I called Mark Bennett, an old college friend now working as a private investigator. "I need a favor," I said. He laughed. "Sounds serious already." "It is. I need to know who's receiving mail at a certain address on South Tacoma Way." He whistled. "Give me 24 hours. I thanked him, closed the laptop, and leaned against the counter. The peppermint pie was still in the fridge, the crust beginning to harden. I sliced a piece, ate a bite. It tasted of sugar and endings. When I finally turned off the lights, the city was quiet. I lay awake for a long time, listening to the faint echo of Dad's voice in my head. "Get out. Never come back." The words no longer hurt. They were just coordinates now pointing me exactly where I needed to go. The photograph Mark sent arrived early the next morning. Vivian was standing at the mailbox outside the garage, holding a thick white envelope with the Evergreen Bank logo printed in blue. Her nails were perfect crimson red against the paper. The camera caught her mid-turn mouth slightly open, eyes scanning the street before slipping the envelope under her coat. It was the kind of image that didn't need words. Proof rarely does. I saved it on my phone and let out a slow breath. Outside my apartment window, the rain slid down the glass in long, clean lines. The city was still waking, unaware that someone's quiet morning had just become evidence. At the bank, the lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and sanitizer. Aaron Patel met me near the customer service desk, his tie perfectly knotted, voice low and professional. He led me into a small office where a woman with silver hair sat waiting. "This is Dana Parker," he said. "She's in charge of our fraud investigations." Dana extended her hand. Firm grip, steady eyes. "Please have a seat." I handed her the folder I'd been keeping on my desk, every printed email, every screenshot, the copy of the contract with the forged signature. She flipped through it with a practiced calm, making small notes in the margin. "You did your homework," she said. "Most people panic. I don't like wasting time. That's a useful trait." Aaron leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Hagen, the address on the application matches a property leased under a business name, registered to Robert Hagen Automotive Services. Do you know this person?" "He's my dad." The air shifted quiet but sharp. Dana's pen stopped moving. "I see," she said slowly. "That complicates things, but it also clarifies motive. Has he contacted you since this began?" "No. He told me to leave his house a month ago." She nodded once, neither surprised nor sympathetic, just taking it in. "We'll coordinate with the dealer and the local authorities. If you're comfortable, I'd like to loop in the Tacoma Police Department. Do what you need to do." After the meeting, I walked down Pine Street toward the parking lot. The wind had picked up, carrying the faint smell of wet leaves and diesel from a passing bus. Seattle felt colder that day, the kind of chill that starts in your bones rather than your skin. I sat in the car, hands on the steering wheel, and stared at the reflection of my own face in the rearview mirror. It was strange how calm I looked. By the afternoon, Dana emailed me an update. She had spoken to Detective Miguel Alvarez from the Tacoma Police. He'd agreed to review the case. I wrote back a single line. "I'll cooperate fully." Then I closed the laptop and tried to focus on work. But the numbers on the screen blurred together. Every spreadsheet looked like noise. That evening, Lisa came over with a paper bag from the corner Thai place. She kicked off her shoes, poured wine into mismatched glasses, and sat across from me. "So what's next?" she asked between bites of pad thai. "They're involving the police now." Lisa stopped chewing. "Seriously?" I nodded. "He used my information. My credit. My name." Her face softened. "You think he knows you found out, probably. But knowing him, he'll convince himself he can talk his way out of it." She sighed. I can't believe he'd risk that much. Believe it. Pride makes people stupid. Later, after she left, I took the photo of Vivian from my phone and printed it. I pinned it to the inside of my folder beneath the forged documents. The pieces were starting to fit together. All I had to do was let them tighten until the truth snapped into place. The next morning, Dana called. We've received a confirmation from the dealer. The vehicle was purchased with forged identification matching your name. The signature on the insurance form matches your dad's handwriting from his previous accounts with us. She paused. You said he works at that address, correct? Yes. Then that's enough to move forward. Detective Alvarez wants to schedule a statement. When I arrived at the precinct, the fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. Alvarez was middle-aged, patient eyes, the kind of face that carried experience rather than judgment. He offered coffee I didn't take and motioned to a chair across his desk. He began gently. Tell me how it started. I told him about the dinner, about the argument, about the phone call from the bank. He didn't interrupt. Just wrote in a small notebook. When I mentioned Vivian receiving the letter, his brow lifted slightly. We'll need a copy of that photo. Already printed, I said, sliding it across the desk. Good, he murmured. We'll get a warrant to collect the vehicle and verify documentation. I'll keep you informed. On the way out, I passed a bulletin board filled with missing person notices, faded flyers curling at the edges. The quiet hum of the hallway followed me to the elevator. Justice, I thought, doesn't always wear sirens. Sometimes it moves in paperwork and signatures. That night, rain hit the windows harder than usual. I turned off the lights and sat by the kitchen counter, tracing the rim of my glass with a fingertip. I remembered being 12, helping Dad fill out forms for his old repair shop because his handwriting was messy. He'd laugh, saying, "You should work with numbers one day, kid. You have a head for them." I had, and now those same numbers were undoing him. My phone buzzed again close to midnight. It was Mark. Got something, he said when I answered. The mail from Evergreen Bank wasn't the only thing delivered there. A few weeks ago, your dad received letters from 2 other lenders. One had your name, too. I felt a chill even though the apartment was warm. Send me copies. Already did. Check your inbox. When I opened the email, there were 3 photographs. 2 envelopes with my name, one labeled pre-approval. Another thicker opened, both addressed to that same Tacoma garage. The third photo showed a piece of paper taped inside the office window, closed, for repairs. He's getting ready to disappear, I whispered. Mark's voice was steady. Not if we move first. I barely slept. In the early gray light, I drafted a formal affidavit for the bank confirming I did not authorize any of the transactions. I attached the FTC report, the credit freeze confirmations, the photograph of Vivian, and the mail images from Mark. I labeled every file time-stamped, cross-referenced. It was methodical, almost soothing. Around 9, Dana called again. Her tone was brisk, but contained a note of relief. The police located the vehicle this morning at the same garage. They're bringing in your dad for questioning. I sat very still, the phone pressed against my ear. Did he say anything? Not yet, but they'll hold him for fraud and identity misuse pending verification. You've done everything right, Ms. Hagen. When the call ended, I went to the window again. Down on the street, a man was walking his dog through the drizzle, the leash cutting a faint line through the mist. Life, ordinary and small, went on as if nothing had happened. Yet something had, something irreversible. Lisa texted later. Heard anything new? They've taken him in, I typed. Long pause. Then, how do you feel? I looked at the screen for a long time before answering. Tired, I wrote, but steady. The day passed in slow motion. Emails, phone calls, background noise. At sunset, I walked to the pier near Alki, the sky streaked in faded orange. Seagulls circled over the water. The smell of salt mixed with the city's metallic air. I sat on a bench and thought about how justice never really feels like victory. It feels like silence after too much noise. When I got home, the answering machine light blinked. A single new message. The voice was Robert's, rough and low. You didn't have to do this, Vanessa. You could have called. I listened to it twice, then deleted it. My hands didn't shake. The quiet afterward felt almost clean. The rain had stopped by the time I reached the precinct the next morning, but the air still smelled of wet pavement and exhaust. Inside, everything was too bright. Fluorescent lights buzzing, the faint echo of shoes on tile. Detective Alvarez motioned for me to follow him down a narrow hallway lined with filing cabinets and tired-looking posters about fraud prevention. He opened a door at the end and said softly, "Wait here." Through the glass, I saw my dad sitting at the table, hands folded, looking smaller than I remembered. Vivian sat beside him, her lipstick smudged, a forced smile frozen on her face. The sight didn't sting the way I thought it would. It just felt hollow. Alvarez closed the door and turned back to me. They deny everything he said. But the documents are clear. We'll move carefully. When I stepped outside, the morning light hit like cold metal. The street was slick puddles reflecting pieces of gray sky. I took a deep breath and walked to my car. My phone buzzed before I started the engine. It was Dana Parker. Her voice was even, as if she had said the same sentence 100 times before. We've confirmed multiple applications using your information, Vanessa. 2 lenders both intercepted before disbursement. Your dad and stepmother attempted to open them within days of the first one. I wrote down everything she said, my pen pressing hard enough to leave marks through the page. When she finished, I thanked her. Then she added quietly, "You handled this faster than most. You'd be surprised how many people ignore the warning signs." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I told her I learned young that silence and denial never fix a thing. At work, the office hummed with the usual rhythm. Phones ringing, printers whirring, the smell of coffee drifting from the break room. I logged into my system, stared at the market updates, but none of it mattered. My focus kept slipping back to that image of Vivian at the mailbox. I could still see her turning her head, making sure no one was watching. I wondered if she had convinced herself it wasn't a crime, just a temporary borrowing of luck. By lunchtime, Lisa texted, "Coffee after work. I need your face, not your voicemail." I typed a quick yes. The cafe near Pike Street was crowded with the after-5 rush. The smell of cinnamon and espresso hung thick in the air. Lisa arrived in scrubs, hair pulled back, eyes kind but tired. She hugged me longer than usual. We found a table near the window. "So what's happening now?" she asked. They confirmed 2 more attempts. Lisa's eyes widened. "Both under your name?" "Yes. And both tied to Dad's garage." She shook her head slowly. "Do you think Vivian's the one driving this? I think they're both too comfortable in each other's lies to remember where one ends." Lisa sipped her coffee, then leaned forward. "You always said you didn't need revenge, that you just wanted peace." "I still do. But sometimes peace looks like a police report." We both laughed, a quiet release that felt more like air escaping than humor. After she left, I lingered, watching the reflection of traffic lights ripple across the wet street. Somewhere between the sound of cups clinking and a door closing, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done with anger. What replaced it was colder and cleaner. Resolution. That night, I sorted through my folders again. Printed copies, timestamps, photos, correspondence. I labeled each section with a sticky note. Fraud application 1. Dealer communication. Proof of address link. Vivian photo evidence. It was strange how methodical justice could feel when you stripped it of rage. Near midnight, my phone vibrated. It was Mark. Found something he said. He'd tracked a second delivery address connected to one of the attempted loans. A storage facility registered under Vivian's maiden name. "I'll drive there tomorrow," I said. "You shouldn't go alone. I'm not walking into a war zone, still I'll meet you there. Noon." The next day, the clouds broke just enough to let a pale sun through. The storage facility sat off a service road near Tacoma Mall, rows of metal doors painted faded blue. The manager, a round man in a Seahawks hoodie, checked the record for us. Unit 92, Vivian Brooks. Paid up 6 months in advance. He pointed down the row. Mark looked at me, silent question in his eyes. I nodded. We waited in the car until a black SUV pulled in 20 minutes later. Vivian stepped out alone, hair tied back, sunglasses on. She walked straight to the unit, keyed it open, and began loading small boxes into the trunk. Mark lifted his camera. The click of the shutter was almost lost in the wind. She paused once, scanning the lot, but didn't see us. When she drove off, we followed just long enough to capture the license plate. Later, at a diner off the freeway, Mark slid his camera across the booth. "That's enough to prove she's moving evidence," he said. I nodded, staring at the screen. One of the boxes had the Evergreen Bank logo printed on it. After he left, I ordered coffee and sat there until the waitress began wiping tables. The neon sign outside flickered, red light bleeding through the window. I thought about the last Christmas dinner before Vivian entered our lives, the one where Dad carved the turkey and told me he was proud of my new job. Back then, his approval had felt like sunlight. Now it felt like a trick of reflection, something that warmed you just long enough to forget it could burn. The next morning, Dana called again. Her voice carried a new tone, firm and measured. "The Tacoma police retrieved the SUV. It was purchased under your identity, but insured with your dad's business account. They also found unopened mail linking to the storage unit. It's now part of the investigation." I thanked her and hung up. My reflection in the laptop screen looked distant, the kind of calm that comes after a storm rather than before it. I started writing an email to Lisa, then stopped. There was nothing left to explain. Everything that needed to unfold already had momentum. That evening, I walked along the waterfront. The wind smelled of salt and rain gulls crying above the gray water. Couples passed laughing, holding hands. I watched them without envy. Life had a way of resetting itself when you stopped trying to rewrite the past. When I returned home, the answering machine blinked again. Another message from Dad. His voice was tired. "We can fix this, Vanessa." "You don't understand what's happening." I stood there listening. My finger hovered over the delete button, then dropped. The message stayed. Evidence was still evidence, even when it spoke in the voice that once told you bedtime stories. Later that night, I opened my window to the sound of rain starting again. I thought about how truth worked the same way. It gathered slowly, drop by drop, until the weight of it forced something to break. The video arrived in my inbox before sunrise. No subject line, no signature, just a file attachment from Mark. I opened it while the coffee maker hummed behind me. The footage was grainy, the kind of gray security feed that made everything look colder than it was. Vivian stepped out of the same black SUV, her heels clicking against the wet concrete. She opened the storage unit, lifted one of the boxes, and turned toward this camera for a second. The bank logo flashed clear across the side. She checked her phone, looked around, then locked the unit again. The timestamp read 2:37 in the morning. I paused the video and watched her frozen mid-turn, her face tense and calculating. Proof didn't need volume, it only needed time. When I got to work, the sky had turned the color of unpolished steel. Seattle was in one of its moods again, the kind that pressed against windows and made everyone quiet. I sat through a meeting without hearing a word. My mind kept circling back to that image of Vivian in the dark, moving boxes that didn't belong to her. By the afternoon, Dana called. The police obtained a warrant to open the unit. She asked if I wanted to be present. I hesitated, then said yes. The following morning, I met them at the storage facility. The air was damp, filled with the faint smell of oil and rust. Alvarez was already there, his notepad tucked under his arm. Dana stood beside him in a tan coat, clipboard in hand. She nodded when she saw me. "We're opening it now." The padlock snapped under the bolt cutter with a sound that made my stomach tighten. The door rolled up metal, groaning against metal. Inside were 4 boxes, 2 marked with the Evergreen logo, 1 with Rain City Motors and 1 unmarked. Alvarez opened the unmarked box first. Inside were copies of financial statements, fake IDs, and dealership forms with my name. Vivian's handwriting appeared in small notes along the edges. He lifted one paper carefully with a gloved hand. Dana leaned closer, reading aloud the date. "The day before my dad's arrest." I felt my throat go dry. It wasn't a shock anymore, just confirmation. After the inventory was logged, Alvarez sealed the boxes back up for evidence. He turned to me. "We'll bring these downtown. You did the right thing by documenting everything early." I nodded. Doing the right thing rarely felt satisfying. It just felt necessary. Driving back to Seattle, I rolled down the window halfway, letting the cold air cut through the stale heat of the car. My thoughts drifted to the last conversation I'd had with Dad before. Everything broke apart. He'd said I was too careful, that I didn't know how to trust people. Maybe he was right, but careful was what kept me standing. That evening, Lisa came over again, bringing soup and a bottle of white wine. She dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her shoes. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said. "I slept. I just didn't rest." She poured the wine and sat beside me on the couch. "So what's next? The police have what they need. Vivian's handwriting is all over the paperwork." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "You think your dad knew? He knew. He always knows when it benefits him to pretend he doesn't." She took a sip of wine, studying me. "You're scaring me a little with how calm you are." I smiled faintly. Calm doesn't mean forgiving. We ate in silence for a while, the sound of rain against the windows filling the spaces where words didn't fit. Later, when she left, I walked through the apartment, turning off lights one by one until only the kitchen lamp remained. The city outside was blurred with rain. I set my phone on the counter and stared at it, half expecting it to ring again. When it did, I almost laughed. The screen flashed Robert Hagan. I let it ring out. Then I pressed play on the voicemail. His voice was slow, measured, almost tired. "You can stop this, Vanessa. You're ruining your own family." I deleted it and poured the rest of the wine into the sink. "Families ruin themselves," I whispered. The next day I received an email from Dana. The police found multiple fake accounts opened under variations of my name. Vivian had been using my credit to lease smaller equipment for the garage. The pattern stretched back months. I read the email twice, then forwarded it to my attorney. The message I added was simple: proceed as discussed. That evening, Mark called. He'd done a background check on Vivian's business filings. Her maiden name appeared on 2 shell companies linked to the garage. He sounded almost apologetic as he spoke. "You were right to follow your instincts. This wasn't sloppy greed." It was organized. I thanked him. He hesitated. Vanessa, you sure you're okay doing this alone? I'm not alone. I just stopped waiting for someone to help me. That night I dreamed of the garage again. The smell of oil, the echo of my dad's laughter from years ago, his hands stained with grease. He used to tell me that engines don't lie. If something's wrong, they make noise. Maybe that's why silence had always scared him. I woke before dawn, the dream still lingering. The air in the apartment felt heavy, like the pause before a confession. I got dressed and drove toward Tacoma. The clouds hung low, a muted ceiling of gray. Outside the garage, yellow tape fluttered in the wind. The sign read "Closed under investigation." I stood there for a moment, the smell of gasoline sharp in the air. The place looked smaller than I remembered. Everything does when you stop looking up to it. On the way back, I pulled over near a park overlooking the bay. The water was a sheet of silver under the weak light. I sat there for a long time, thinking about all the years I'd spent trying to earn my dad's respect. Every success, every degree, every calm answer had been a quiet plea to be seen differently. But people see what fits their story, not yours. When I got home, there was an envelope slipped under my door. No return address. Inside was a folded note in my dad's handwriting. I only wanted to fix what I broke. Don't let them take everything. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I tore the paper neatly in half and dropped it into the trash. The sound it made was small, almost delicate. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote a summary of every event since the dinner. Dates, names, phone numbers. It wasn't for the police, it was for me. To see it all in one place, stripped of emotion, clear as math. When I finished, I closed the file and sat back. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Justice didn't need to be loud, it only needed to be thorough. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and polished wood. My heels clicked against the tile as I followed Dana down the hallway, the echo sharp and clean. We passed closed doors, each one marked with names that carried the weight of authority. When we stopped at room 214, she turned to me. "Today is just a preliminary review," she said quietly. "The investigator will verify the chain of evidence and statements. You won't need to speak unless asked." I nodded, though my pulse had already found its rhythm steady but strong. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Detective Alvarez sat across from a man in a navy suit who introduced himself as the district financial crimes officer. The table between them was covered in folders. My name was on every one of them. As they began the review, the details unspooled like a story I already knew by heart. Loan documents, email traces, the fake ID with my picture printed slightly off-center. Vivian's handwriting on the margin of an insurance form. My dad's signature on the application itself. Every piece matched like dominoes arranged just to fall in perfect order. I kept my hands folded in my lap, watching from a distance. Only my body understood. There was no anger left to summon, only the quiet discipline of seeing a lie unravel without my help. When it ended, Alvarez looked at me. "You did everything by the book," he said. "Most people never get this far." I almost laughed. Years in finance teach you to track what people want to hide. I just never thought I'd use it at home. Dana smiled faintly. "Consider this official now. The court has accepted the fraud report and opened a case against Robert and Vivian Hagen for identity misuse and credit deception." The words landed without ceremony. Accepted, opened, case. I thanked her, then walked outside. The wind hit me full in the face, carrying the smell of rain and asphalt. The courthouse steps gleamed wet under the gray light. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faint pull of something like relief. That evening, Lisa stopped by unannounced. She carried takeout again. Her small act of friendship turned into a ritual. She set the food on the counter, studied me for a moment, then said, "You look like someone who's finally breathing again." Maybe. Or maybe I'm just between storms. She smiled softly. "What happens next? They'll process the evidence. Then it's up to the prosecutors." She hesitated. "Do you ever think about forgiving them?" I poured water into 2 glasses, setting one in front of her. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. Sometimes it's just the decision not to carry the weight anymore. Lisa nodded. "That sounds like something you've practiced." "Every day," I said quietly. After she left, I sat by the window. Outside, the city lights shimmered through a thin layer of mist. Somewhere far away, a siren wailed and faded. I thought about my mom. She had died when I was 16, leaving me with a dad who confused control for care. I remembered the first time he taught me how to balance a checkbook, how his voice softened when he called me smart. That memory used to comfort me. Now it only explained too much. The next morning, an email from Dana waited in my inbox. A copy of Vivian's written statement had been added to the file. I opened it, heart steady, breath even. She claimed she had no idea what Robert was doing, that she only followed his instructions, that he had promised it was temporary. Her handwriting was neat, slanted, almost elegant. I read it twice, then closed the file. There was always a story, always a justification. I had learned that apologies written in ink were worth less than silence. By noon, Alvarez called. He said the court issued a summons for a formal interrogation. They wanted to confirm the signatures and timeline. I agreed to come in. The station was quieter this time. Vivian sat across from Alvarez, her makeup too perfect. Her composure rehearsed. She avoided my eyes. I watched her twist a silver bracelet around her wrist. When Alvarez showed her the photographs from the storage unit, her lips trembled just slightly. She said she didn't remember signing anything. She said Robert handled all the papers. Her voice cracked only once when she said my name. I didn't flinch. When the questioning ended, I walked out before she did. The hallway smelled of coffee and tired air. I stopped at the vending machine, bought a bottle of water, and stood there until the cold plastic steadied my hands. Through the glass door, I saw her leaving. She looked smaller now, a woman shaped by excuses. Driving home, I realized I hadn't thought about revenge in days. It wasn't revenge anymore, it was maintenance. Like fixing a leak before it flooded the house. I didn't want to ruin them. I just wanted it to stop. That night, the phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered. It was my dad's lawyer. His voice was polite, almost kind. He said Robert wanted to speak to me. I told him not to call again. When he tried to insist, I hung up. The silence after that click felt like a full sentence. The next day, the weather cleared. I took the afternoon off and drove to Discovery Park. The trails smelled of pine and salt, the air heavy with the promise of spring. I walked until I reached the bluff overlooking the water. The wind tangled my hair, and for a moment, I let the sound of waves replace every noise in my head. It wasn't a victory. It was space. Back home, I opened a letter from the insurance company confirming the reversal of the fraudulent policy. The account had been closed, the balance cleared. I filed it neatly in the same folder with everything else. The stack was growing, a paper monument to boundaries finally respected. As the week ended, Dana called one last time. The prosecutor officially charged Robert and Vivian with financial fraud and identity theft. She said there would be hearings to follow, but the investigation was done. Congratulations, she added, though her voice carried more fatigue than triumph. I thanked her. Then I hung up, walked to the balcony, and let the cool air fill my lungs. The city was alive below me, a hum of traffic and distant music. For the first time, I felt separate from it, like someone who had climbed out of a story instead of being stuck inside it. When I turned back inside, the apartment felt lighter. On the counter, the folder lay closed, its corners worn from handling. I ran my fingers along its edge, then placed it in the drawer beneath the spare keys. It was no longer a collection of evidence. It was a map of what not to forget. That night I dreamed again of the garage, only this time the doors were open and the sound of engines had stopped. No shouting, no laughter, just quiet. The day they took my dad in was colder than it should have been. The kind of chill that seeps into your clothes no matter how tightly you pull them around yourself. I was in my office going through quarterly reports when my phone buzzed with a text from Dana. Short, efficient, factual. They've arrested him. My hand froze midair, pen suspended above the page. I read the message twice before setting the pen down. The word arrested looked strange in print, detached from the man I used to know. Outside the window, a gray drizzle swept across the city, making the skyline look smudged. The moment I had expected for months arrived without fanfare. No shock, no satisfaction, just the quiet acknowledgement that something inevitable had finally happened. By the time I left work, the rain had turned to mist. Seattle was wrapped in fog, the kind that made every light blur softly. I parked outside my apartment and sat for a while, engine still running. The radio murmured in the background, but I couldn't catch a single word. When I finally turned it off, the silence felt cleaner. My reflection in the windshield looked older, not in years, but in the way a person looks when they've carried too much truth for too long. That night, Lisa called. Her voice came through with the familiar steadiness that had anchored me more times than I could count. I heard she said gently, "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe I will be later." "You did the right thing." "It doesn't feel like it." She was quiet for a moment. "Justice never feels like joy. It's something colder. Something steadier." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Maybe that's what I wanted all along. Steady, not loud. The next morning, Dana called again. "They're processing him in Tacoma," she said. "Vivian has been summoned for questioning. Alvarez will keep me updated." I thanked her and hung up. For a while, I just stood by the window watching the morning unfold. Across the street, a woman was walking her dog in a bright yellow coat. The leash cut a clean line through the mist, and the dog's tail wagged, like none of the world's heaviness mattered. I envied that kind of innocence. Later that afternoon, a courier delivered an envelope from the police department. Inside was a formal notification of the arrest and a summary of the charges: identity theft, financial fraud, falsifying documents, misuse of personal information. My name appeared a dozen times. It was unsettling seeing myself rendered as evidence. I folded the papers neatly and placed them in the same drawer as the rest. That drawer had become a quiet archive of boundaries, each page a record of what I refused to tolerate anymore. The following day, the news broke. Small headline, local section. Local business owner arrested for fraud investigation. The photo was grainy, taken outside the courthouse. Robert Hagan, age 62, handcuffed beside an unmarked police car. Vivian wasn't in the picture. She had always been good at avoiding cameras. I read the article once, then again slower. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. Old family friends, former neighbors, people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly remembering my number. Curiosity travels fast when it smells scandalous. I turned the phone face down on the counter and let it buzz itself quiet. That evening I walked to the pier near Alki. The tide was low and the air smelled of salt and seaweed. A few joggers passed their breath, visible in the cold. I leaned against the railing and looked out at the water. The city stretched behind me, its noise softened by distance. When I closed my eyes, I could still hear my dad's voice. Not the angry one from that dinner, but the one from when I was little. The one that told stories about fixing engines, about how every part had to move in balance or the whole thing would collapse. I had spent years trying to balance him, keeping peace where none existed. Now the engine had stopped and the silence felt both foreign and right. When I got home, a voicemail was waiting. I pressed play without thinking. It was Vivian. Her voice trembled. "Vanessa, please, they're saying things that aren't true. He didn't mean for it to go this far." I deleted the message before it finished. The line between meaning and doing had always been invisible to her. The next few days blurred together. Work filled the hours routine held me in place. I still went to meetings, still smiled at clients, still checked the markets as if my world hadn't shifted. At night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the lights on the freeway. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't even feel free. I felt emptied out like a house after the movers leave, space where chaos used to live. On Friday, Alvarez called. He said they'd found more evidence connecting Vivian to the forged insurance policies. Her statement had changed twice in 2 days. She claimed now that she thought it was part of a business restructuring. He sounded tired, his voice gravelly with the kind of weariness that comes from seeing too many lies dressed as logic. I asked him what would happen next. He said the prosecutor was moving forward with both cases. After the call, I opened the drawer and looked at the folder again. For the first time, I realized I didn't need it anymore. The paper had done its work. The proof existed outside of me now. I closed the drawer and walked into the kitchen. The peppermint pie dish was still on the shelf, a faint crack along its rim from that night. I took it down, washed it carefully, and set it to dry. Sometimes, closure looks like cleaning something you should have thrown away long ago. Saturday morning, Lisa and I met for breakfast at a small diner near the waterfront. The place smelled of coffee and bacon grease, the kind of scent that wraps around you like a blanket. She slid into the booth across from me, 2 steaming mugs between us. "So it's really over," she said. "Almost. There'll be hearings, maybe a trial? And after that, I don't know, maybe I'll take some time off. You've earned it." We ate in a companionable quiet for a while. When I looked up, Lisa was smiling at me, not the sympathetic kind of smile, but the proud one that comes from knowing someone finally did what they had to do. That afternoon as I drove home, the clouds broke just enough to let sunlight through. The light hit the water, scattering gold across the bay. For a brief second, it looked like everything was shining at once. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and let the cold air rush in, the sound of the waves mixed with the distant hum of traffic. I closed my eyes and thought of that word again. Arrested. It no longer belonged to him alone. It belonged to the motion that had finally stopped, to the noise that had finally quieted. When I got home, the mailbox was full again. Bills, flyers, a single letter from the attorney confirming the next hearing date. I placed it on the counter unopened. Some truths didn't need to be rushed. That night, I stood by the window one last time before bed. The city lights blinked below like tiny heartbeats. Somewhere my dad was sitting in a cell, and for the first time, I didn't feel small thinking about him. I didn't feel like his daughter or his disappointment. I felt like someone who had learned how to draw a line and keep it clean. The rain started again, soft against the glass, steady as breathing. The first time I saw my dad in court, he looked like a stranger wearing a memory. His suit hung loose at the shoulders, his tie crooked as if his hands had forgotten how to make a proper knot. Vivian sat 2 rows behind him, sunglasses perched on her head even though the courtroom had no sunlight. The air smelled faintly of dust and coffee, the kind of stale mix that clings to old buildings and bad choices. I sat in the back beside Dana, her folder balanced neatly on her knees. When the bailiff called the session to order, the scrape of chairs echoed through the room like an exhale. None of us realized we were holding. My dad didn't turn to look at me. He didn't have to. Silence carried its own kind of acknowledgement. The prosecutor's voice was calm, measured steady as a metronome. She laid out every piece of evidence like a careful pianist hitting notes she'd practiced 1,000 times. Forged documents, fraudulent accounts, email correspondences, surveillance footage, Vivian's partial confession. Each word carved the air thinner. I watched my dad's shoulders rise and fall, slow, deliberate, like he was trying to breathe through cement. When the prosecutor said my name, something in him flinched. A small movement, almost invisible, but I caught it. Guilt isn't loud. It's a flicker. When it was my turn to speak, the judge asked if I wanted to read a statement. I stood, hands clasped, voice steady. I said I wanted to thank the investigators and confirm the accuracy of my financial records, that was all. I didn't mention the dinners or the laughter or the years of small humiliations that had built this moment. The courtroom wasn't the place for grief. It was for truth. After the hearing outside in the corridor, reporters waited. Microphones, cameras, questions about motives and family betrayal. Dana stepped in front of me before I could respond, her tone professional but firm, no comment. She guided me through the crowd until we reached the elevator. Inside, the doors closed, sealing out the noise. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. She looked at me. "You handled that well," she said. "Handling things is what I do best." She smiled faintly. That's rare these days. I drove home without turning on the radio. The road stretched ahead in long gray lines broken by flashes of headlights. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was simply going forward. That evening, I opened my email and found a message from Lisa. She'd seen the local news clip. "Just checking on you," it read. Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. I smiled and replied I'm okay. Then I shut the laptop and made tea, letting the steam rise around me like a small shield against the world. The next day, Dana called. Vivian had been released on bail, her cooperation noted. My dad remained in custody pending trial. She said he'd refused legal counsel twice before finally agreeing to a public defender. I asked if he'd made a statement. She paused. He said it wasn't supposed to go this far, that it was supposed to be temporary. Temporary, I repeated. That's one way to describe theft. Dana exhaled softly. I've seen worse, but rarely from family. I thanked her again and hung up. The word temporary echoed in my mind long after. It was the same justification he had used when he borrowed my savings for his business 15 years ago, temporary. The same excuse when he sold Mom's jewelry to pay off a loan, temporary. Every wound he ever caused wore that word like a bandage. I had spent half my life believing it meant something would get better. Now I knew it only meant the pain wasn't finished yet. 2 days later, Lisa convinced me to go out. We met at a small art exhibit downtown. The place smelled of paint and faint citrus cleaner, walls covered with muted landscapes, soft blues and greens. Peaceful things. She linked her arm through mine as we walked. "You ever think about what comes after all this?" she asked. "I think about it every morning, and I'm not sure yet. Maybe a new city. Maybe just new mornings." She smiled. "I like that. New mornings." We lingered at a painting of an empty pier at dawn. It reminded me of the one near Alki. Quiet, endless, a place that existed between endings and beginnings. Later that night when I got home, there was another letter in my mailbox. This one postmarked from the detention center. I carried it upstairs, held it under the kitchen light, then placed it unopened beside the rest of the paperwork. I didn't need his words. I already knew how they would sound. Remorse tangled with defense, maybe an apology shaped like an excuse. Some things were better unread. The next morning, Alvarez called. He wanted to update me before the trial date. I asked if Vivian was still cooperating. He said she was, and her testimony might reduce her sentence. He also said my dad had mentioned me in his last interview. He told them I was always good with numbers, that he never thought I'd turn on him. "Turn on him," I repeated. Funny choice of words. Alvarez sighed. "I've been in this line of work long enough to know people rarely see the difference between accountability and betrayal." After the call, I sat at the kitchen table, tracing the rim of my coffee mug with one finger. The sky outside was pale, the kind of gray that never really becomes daylight. I thought about what Alvarez said, accountability versus betrayal. Maybe that was the heart of it. I hadn't turned on my dad. I had simply stopped turning toward him. That afternoon, I decided to visit Mom's grave for the first time in years. The cemetery lay just outside Tacoma, quiet and neat. The grass was still damp from rain, and the wind carried the scent of pine. Her name was etched in soft granite, the letters clean but worn. I stood there for a long while, unsure what to say. Finally, I whispered, "It's over now. You can rest. Maybe I can too." On the drive back, sunlight broke through the clouds for a brief, impossible moment. The light hit the windshield warm and gold, and I had to squint to see the road. It felt like a reminder that even the coldest sky could open if you waited long enough. That evening, as I prepared for bed, I noticed the answering machine blinking again. For a second, I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity won. I pressed play. It was Chloe's voice this time, soft, uncertain. "Hi, Vanessa. I don't know if you'll listen to this, but I'm sorry. I didn't understand before. I just wanted you to know that I miss you." The message ended abruptly, leaving a small pocket of silence in the room. I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of all the years between us. Chloe had been a child caught in the crossfire of adults pretending to love. Right. Maybe she finally saw through it. Maybe she was learning too. I didn't delete the message. Some words, even fragile ones, deserve to stay. That night, I lay in the dark, listening to the city outside. A siren in the distance, a car door closing, footsteps fading. The kind of sounds that remind you the world keeps moving. I closed my eyes and let the quiet fold around me, softer than forgiveness, steadier than anger. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was close enough to feel like the start of something real. The story made the local paper again, this time tucked between an article about a new community park and an ad for home insurance. Fraud case reaches sentencing phase. The photo showed my dad entering the courthouse, head down, jacket collar pulled tight. No Vivian beside him this time. The caption said she had accepted a plea deal in exchange for cooperation. I stared at the printed words until they blurred, the ink smudging slightly under my thumb. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt final. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that one small corner of it was closing a chapter it had barely noticed. By that afternoon, Donna called to confirm what I already knew. The sentence had been handed down. 6 years with eligibility for parole after 3. Vivian received probation and mandatory restitution. Dana's tone was even factual, but I could hear the fatigue behind it. "Cases like this rarely end cleanly," she said. "You did well to keep your boundaries." I thanked her and hung up. Boundaries. The word sat heavy in the air. It had cost me half my life to learn it. Lisa came over that evening with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. She set them down with the same care someone might use for fragile things. "It's done then," she said. "It's done." She studied me for a moment, then smiled. "You don't look relieved." "I am just not the kind of relieved person I expect." She nodded as if she understood. We drank quietly, the sound of rain against the windows soft as breathing. Later, she curled up on the couch and fell asleep halfway through an old movie. I covered her with a blanket and turned off the lights. The room glowed faintly from the street outside. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Chloe. I almost didn't open it. The preview line read, "I wanted to tell you something." I took a deep breath and tapped it. She wrote that Vivian had moved out of the house, that Dad's garage was being sold to cover restitution. She said she had found an apartment near campus and a part-time job at a bookstore. Then she added, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm learning." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Learning is a good start." For days afterward, I let the normal things fill the hours. Work, coffee breaks, grocery lists, the hum of daily life. My world began to sound ordinary again, and that was its own kind of grace. One evening, I walked to the waterfront with a notebook tucked under my arm. The sun was setting behind the skyline, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gray. I sat on a bench and began to write. Not for a report, not for evidence, just for me. I wrote about silence and distance, about the ways people hurt each other trying to feel powerful, about how forgiveness sometimes looks like not showing up to the same argument again. When I finished, I closed the notebook and watched the last of the light fade across the water. A small boat drifted past, its wake rippling through the reflection of the city. I wondered if my dad could see the same sky from where he was. Maybe he thought of me, maybe not. Either way, I was finally outside the orbit of his gravity. A week later, Donna invited me to a small luncheon for fraud prevention advocates. She wanted me to share my story. I hesitated, but she insisted it could help others, so I went. The room was filled with people in suits, talking quietly over coffee and fruit trays. When it was my turn, I stood at the podium and looked out over the faces. I told them about vigilance, about protecting their credit, but mostly about what it means to draw a line and keep it. I didn't mention names or emotions, only the truth of what happens when you mistake family for safety. When I finished, the room was quiet, and then someone started clapping. It wasn't loud or long, just enough to remind me that words, when clean, can carry weight. Afterward, Dana squeezed my hand. "You have a way of making the truth sound gentle," she said. I smiled. It doesn't have to hurt to be clear. When I got home, I found a small envelope slipped under my door. No name, no return address. Inside was a photograph of me and Chloe from years ago, standing beside the garage, smiling with grease on our hands from helping Dad fix an old truck. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, were the words, "Keep the good parts." I turned the photo over again, tracing our younger faces. We looked happy, unbroken by what was still ahead. I placed it on the fridge, next to an old postcard from Lisa that said, "Be kind to yourself." The following weekend, Lisa convinced me to go hiking at Rattlesnake Ridge. The climb was steady, the air sharp and clean. When we reached the top, the view stretched wide and endless. The lake below looked like glass, the trees like brushstrokes. She sat beside me, catching her breath. "You think you'll ever see him again?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. But not out of guilt, out of closure. She nodded. "That sounds like peace." I smiled faintly. Maybe, or maybe it's just balance. We stayed there until the light began to soften and the chill crept back in. On the way down, I felt something shift quietly inside me. Not triumph, not sadness, just a release. Like setting down a heavy box I'd carried too far. Back home, I brewed tea and stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. The reflection in the glass looked steadier now, almost familiar. I opened my laptop and logged into a private blog I had started weeks ago but never published. The title read "Boundaries and Silence." That night I wrote the first real post. I wrote about identity theft, but not the financial kind. The kind that happens when you let someone rewrite who you are to fit their comfort. I wrote about reclaiming that identity quietly, methodically, without permission. The words came easily. When I finished, I hit publish and closed the laptop. The act felt small but irreversible. Outside, the rain started again, thin and rhythmic. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn sounded long and low. I stood there for a while listening. Life had rhythm again, not the kind someone else set, but one I had chosen. The letter came from the prison 2 weeks after the sentencing. Plain envelope, blue ink on the return address. His handwriting still careful, the loops neat and familiar. I carried it inside and placed it on the counter beside the coffee maker. For a while, I just stood there staring at it. The morning light slanted across the kitchen floor, catching the edge of the envelope like it was waiting for a decision. I poured coffee, drank half of it, and still didn't open it. By the time I finally did, the cup was cold. His words were short, maybe 10 lines. He wrote that he was sorry, that he never meant to hurt me, that he did it for the family, that he didn't recognize himself anymore. The same voice that once told me to stand tall was now asking for understanding. I folded the letter once and put it back in the envelope. Understanding isn't forgiveness. It's simply recognizing a pattern. That afternoon, I drove out to the park near the waterfront where I used to go after work, before everything happened. The benches were still the same, painted green, carved with initials that time couldn't smooth away. I sat near the edge and watched seagulls circling over the water. Somewhere behind me, children were laughing, chasing a kite that kept dipping too low. I thought about how light and wind and control all had to balance for something to stay in the air. I had spent years trying to balance things that were never mine to steady. When I got home, I placed the letter in the top drawer of my desk, beside a folder of old tax returns and the photograph Chloe had sent. I didn't want to destroy it, not yet. Maybe one day, when the emotion in his handwriting no longer felt like a ghost. Lisa called that evening. She asked if I had read it. I said yes. Did it change anything, she asked. Not really. Maybe it just reminded me that people can be sorry and still not be different. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Sometimes sorry is just a way of saying I see what I lost." Maybe I said, "But loss isn't always punishment, sometimes it's the cure." Later that night, I sat by the window with my notebook. The city below flickered with life cars moving in slow patterns, red and white lights threading through the streets. I began writing again, not about him, but about myself. The chapters I had closed quietly without ceremony. The mistakes I'd made out of loyalty, the parts of me I'd hidden to stay small enough to fit someone else's version of love. By midnight, the words had slowed my handwriting uneven from fatigue. I looked at what I'd written and felt something shift. It wasn't pride or relief, it was recognition. the kind that lets you see yourself clearly without turning away. The next morning, a package arrived. Inside was a copy of a local financial magazine. Dana had mentioned they might feature a short article about fraud prevention, using my story with my permission. I hadn't expected them to include a quote. It was printed near the bottom of the page. "Silence is not surrender. It is clear." I traced the sentence with my finger. It didn't feel like advice. It felt like a summary of everything I'd learned. That evening, I took a walk through the city. The sky was low and blue, the air cold enough to make each breath visible. I passed a bakery that smelled like cinnamon, a bookstore still open late, a couple laughing over shared fries in a booth by the window. Normal life untouched by my kind of story. I realized I wasn't jealous of it anymore. I was part of it again, just quieter. A few days later, Chloe called. Her voice trembled slightly when she spoke. She said she was visiting Dad that weekend and wanted to know if she could tell him anything from me. I hesitated, hearing the hope underneath her question. "Tell him I hope he's using the time to think," I said finally. She breathed out maybe a small laugh or a sigh. "He asks about you, you know." "Let him," I said, "thinking is free." We talked for a while about school, her new job, and the way she was trying to rebuild. She told me she was learning about budgeting and credit, how she wanted to stay careful. I smiled. "Maybe lessons really do run in the family," I said. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time. The city outside hummed with its usual rhythm. Somewhere a train sounded in the distance, low and steady. I thought about how healing rarely feels like progress. It feels like repetition, like doing the same small good thing every day until one day you notice it's no longer working. The next weekend, I met Lisa for coffee. She told me about a new apartment she was considering, one closer to the clinic. We sat by the window as rain streaked down the glass, our reflections bending and reforming with each drop. She reached across the table and said, "You know, you could teach a class on boundaries." I laughed. "I think I barely passed the subject myself." She smiled. "Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who learned the hardest way." When she left, I stayed for another cup. The barista switched the music to something slow and old, a jazz tune I didn't know but liked. I closed my eyes for a moment and let it wash over me. The sound reminded me that quiet didn't have to be empty. It could be full of everything you chose to keep. That night, as I got ready for bed, I opened the letter again. The paper had already softened at the folds, the ink slightly faded where my thumb had pressed earlier. I read it slowly this time, not for content, but for tone. There was fear in it and something else too. Maybe regret, maybe habit. I folded it back carefully and whispered into the dark, "I release you. Not for you, but for me." When I turned off the light, I stood by the window for a moment, watching the city pulse below. I thought about Mom again, how she used to tell me that peace isn't a gift, it's a skill. You practice it like breathing until one day it becomes automatic. I didn't understand her then, but I did now. The rain started again, soft as memory. I lay in bed and listened to it, my thoughts drifting between past and present. Somewhere between them, I felt the quiet click of something closing inside me. Not locked, not buried, just done. The morning the prison closed visitation for renovations, I felt strangely lighter. For weeks, I had debated whether I would ever go see him sit across the glass, listen to him explain or defend or simply speak. But when the announcement came, the decision was made for me. I didn't have to choose anymore. I drove instead to the coast, the one place Mom used to love. The air smelled of salt and wild grass, the sky a pale sweep of silver over restless water. I walked along the shoreline until the wind stung my cheeks and my hair tangled across my face. I stopped when I saw a piece of driftwood washed smooth by time. It looked like a broken piece of a ship, or maybe something that had simply survived a storm. I picked it up, turned it in my hand, and thought, survival doesn't always mean staying whole. Sometimes it means learning how to live beautifully in pieces. Back home, the apartment felt quiet but not empty. The walls, the faint smell of coffee, the view of the city through the rain-streaked glass, all of it had become mine again. I made tea and opened my laptop. The small blog I had started weeks ago had grown without me noticing. People were leaving comments. Some shared their own stories of betrayal and rebuilding. Others thanked me for writing what they couldn't say aloud. I read each one slowly, feeling that strange blend of humility and recognition. Pain speaks a universal language, but so does healing. Later that day, Lisa stopped by carrying a plant in a small ceramic pot. She placed it on my counter, brushing soil from her hands. "It's for your window," she said. "Something alive to remind you that growth isn't loud." I smiled. "You always bring the right things." She laughed. "You always pretend you don't need them." We sat at the table drinking tea, the silence between us easy and full. After she left, I watered the plant, then opened the envelope that had been sitting on the desk for days. It was the official closure notice from the court, case completed. Restitution confirmed. The numbers were printed neatly cold and absolute. I read it once, folded it back, and slipped it into the folder with everything else. Then I opened the bottom drawer and took out the letter from Dad, still in its envelope. I set it on top of the file, not as evidence this time, but as acknowledgement. What began in deception had ended in truth. That night I lit a candle on the windowsill. The flame flickered, reflected against the glass, fragile but steady. I thought of my mom again. Of her laugh, her hands in the garden, her voice saying that family is a mirror. You learn who you are by what you refuse to become. I whispered a quiet thank you into the room. It didn't need to reach anyone specific. Gratitude, I had learned, didn't always need an audience. The next weekend, I took Chloe to lunch. She looked older somehow, her eyes softer, the edge in her voice gone. We ate at a small cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus. She told me she had been accepted into a university program. She wanted to study counseling, maybe work with families one day. When she said it, I smiled. That's brave, I told her. She shook her head. No, it's what people like us should do. Help others figure out the mess before it gets too big. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. She didn't pull away. For a moment, it felt like something had been quietly repaired. Not perfect, not whole, but real. After lunch, we walked by the water. The sky was clear for once, the gulls loud overhead. Chloe told me she had visited Dad last month. She said he looked tired, but calmer, almost resigned. I asked what he said. She hesitated, then told me he'd asked if I was happy. I told him you're okay, she said. That you're working, that you're writing. I told him you don't hate him. I stopped walking and looked at her. Did you mean it? She nodded. I meant that you're done with him, which isn't the same as hate. I smiled faintly. That's fair. When we said goodbye, she hugged me tight. Her hair smelled faintly of vanilla shampoo, the same kind she used when she was little. As she walked away, I felt a quiet peace settle in. Life had folded itself into something softer. The sharp corners were gone. That evening, I came home, opened my laptop, and began to write again. I wrote about closure, about the strange quiet that follows justice, about how revenge, when done right, isn't destruction, but restoration. It's the reclaiming of yourself from the wreckage someone else left behind. The words came easily, steady as the rhythm of the rain outside. When I finished, I added a small note at the end for the readers who had followed the story since the beginning. I wrote that silence isn't a weakness, it's wisdom. That sometimes the loudest victory is the life you rebuild in peace. I told them that healing doesn't erase the past, but it teaches you how to walk beside it without being dragged under. And I asked them gently to share their stories if they felt ready. Because stories, when told, become light for someone else still standing in the dark. When I clicked publish, the screen glowed for a moment, then settled. I sat back, feeling the soft hum of the city through the window. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping across the walls, gone as quickly as it came. The plant on the windowsill caught a bit of that light, its leaves trembling slightly in the draft. I thought about how far I'd come from that night at the dinner table. From the peppermint pie cooling in my hands, the laughter that wasn't meant for me, the words that sent me out into the cold. I had walked through betrayal, through anger, through the long work of rebuilding. And somehow, I had found something close to peace. As the candle burned low, I whispered one last thing into the quiet. I forgive you, but I remember. Then I blew it out, and the room went dark except for the city lights beyond the glass. If you've been listening to my story, thank you. If it reminded you of your own, I hope it helped you see that silence can be strength, that standing up for yourself doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it's just walking away and never turning back. Leave a comment, share your story, or tell me what part of it stayed with you. Because in the end, every act of truth begins the same way, with one person choosing to stop being quiet for the wrong reasons.